So it's 1 minute past 3 p.m. Central European Time. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the webinar Under One Roof towards multidisciplinary help for victims of sexual and domestic violence. This is a side event of the ongoing program of the Commission on the Status of Women in New York. And this event is organized by the Office of the Government of the Czech Republic, namely its Gender Equality Department. My name is Michal Broza. I'm head of the United Nations Information Center for the Czech Republic, so-called UNIC, which is part of the UN's worldwide network managed by the Department of Global Communications of the UN Secretariat in New York. And with a great pleasure, I'm going to facilitate this program. It is actually my second engagement of the kind, and it reflects a long-standing cooperation between my office in Prague and the Office of the Government on the issues related to the SDG 5 gender equality. This session is organized while the war in Ukraine is raging. I wish to point out that gender-based violence and violence against women has been a sad and cruel byproduct also at violent conflicts, and therefore this discussion and the search for effective tools to fight violence against women is even more critical. We have invited 3 distinguished international speakers on this panel who will share their perspectives and experience on gender-based violence with focus on the mechanisms that enable joint, comprehensive and multidisciplinary interventions for women and girls who experience violence. Following Belgium example and current trends, NGOs in the Czech Republic, in cooperation with the Office of the Government, are about to open specialized centers for victims of sexual and domestic violence. The centers emphasize a multidisciplinary approach and provide coordinated help in coordination with social services, police, psychological intervention, and law assistance for victims and survivors. This event is organized as part of a project which is being implemented by the Gender Equality Department and is co-funded by Norwegian grants. The department's bilateral partner, Norwegian organization Alternative to Violence, is taking part on this panel and will have a chance to listen to their experience shortly. Now, let me quote the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who says that violence against women and girls continues to be the most pervasive and pressing human rights issue in the world today. It is both an abhorrent crime and a public health emergency with far-reaching consequences for millions of women and girls in every corner of the globe. But violence against women is not inevitable. The right policies and programs bring results. That means comprehensive long-term strategies that tackle the root causes of violence, protect the rights of women and girls, and promote strong and autonomous women's rights movements. Ending the quotation of Mr. Guterres. And with this message in mind, the aim of this event is to broaden a discussion on a response to the violence and promote effective and sensitive help for those who experience violence. During the whole event, you are encouraged to place questions, preferably in a Q&A function. You can find it in the bottom right part of your screen. There is also a chat box, but we prefer that you place the questions in the Q&A section. I will refer your questions to our speakers in the final part of the event after we hear the contributions. And please note that the platform does not allow that you turn your cameras on and microphone on, and questions therefore may be only placed via this Q&A function. Please also note that this event is also streamed via YouTube on Gender Equality Department of the Czech Republic and will be recorded, and the organizers will share the link with you. Once again, welcome, and let me now introduce the members of our panel. Ms. Petra Sikorová, she's a lawyer and consultant at Profem, the NGO in the Czech Republic. Mr. Henning Mochabt is a clinical psychologist of the Alternative to Violence, an NGO from Norway. And Mr. Renato Galvez, who is a coordinator of the Attention, Protection and Reparation Program for Violence Against Women of the National Service for Women and Gender Equity in Chile. I'm now also pleased to welcome here, on behalf of the organizers, Mr. Radan Šafařík, who is the head of Gender Equality Department of the Office of the Government of the Czech Republic. Welcome. And Ms. Branislava Marvanová-Vargová, who is head of social service at ROSA NGO and the chairperson of Governmental Committee for Prevention of Gender-Based Violence in the Czech Republic. Now the floor is yours, and I'm asking Mr. Šafařík to take the floor.
Thank you for the floor, dear colleagues and participants. It is my great pleasure to open this side event organized by the Czech Republic in cooperation with the Norwegian organization Alternative to Violence. This side event will focus on multidisciplinary approach to support provided to victims of sexual and domestic violence. It is indeed important to continue to remind that gender-based violence is one of the most serious violations of human rights. Around 30% of women around the world has experienced domestic or sexual violence. At the same time, gender-based violence is a highly latent and hidden form of violence. Survivors of such violence face stereotypes, fear, shame, dependency on the perpetrator, or insensitive treatment from public authorities. For that reason, the vast majority of victims never decide to report the violence to public authorities. Domestic and sexual violence is on the rise during the crisis. During the last 2 years, the situation of victims has been dramatically worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. Stay-at-home orders, closures of schools and childcare facilities have isolated families and added to the stress at home. In many cases, organizations providing help to victims of domestic violence reported a significant increase of clients. In the Czech Republic, for example, it is estimated that the number of cases of domestic violence has risen by 40% during the pandemic. Furthermore, women and girls are increasingly endangered by sexual violence during war, as it was already mentioned by Michal Piroža. Despite the huge wave of solidarity with Ukraine and Ukrainian refugees, we are starting to witness sexual abuse and human trafficking of women and girls fleeing the war. But it is not only the case of Ukraine, but also the case of many other conflicts around the world. Taking into account those circumstances, it is clear that protection against gender-based violence and equality and the quality of services provided to victims is a crucial issue of today. It is also clear that sexual and domestic violence is a global issue, as no country in the world has achieved to eradicate gender-based violence. However, various countries do differ in approaches to support victims of domestic and sexual violence and to prevent such violence. The rights and needs of victims need to be our utmost priority and has to be fully taken into account in all of our activities. Prevention of domestic and gender-based violence and protection of its victims is one of the long-term priorities of the Czech government. Our current government commits itself in its policy statement to ensure better protection for victims of sexual and domestic violence. Tackling violence against women is also one of the priorities of the upcoming Czech presidency of the Council of the European Union. During the last couple of years, the Czech Republic adopted a number of specific measures focusing on protection of women from domestic and sexual violence. For example, in 2007, intervention centers, a specific service mandated to provide assistance to victims and to coordinate multidisciplinary cooperation were created in all regions of the Czech Republic. In 2013, the Act on Victims of Crimes was adopted, granting specific rights to victims of domestic and sexual violence. The Act, for example, grants the right to free legal assistance or the right to protection against secondary victimization. Since 2015, a national helpline for victims of crimes and domestic violence has been operating in the Czech Republic. During the last couple of years, a number of race awareness campaigns has been implemented by the civil society sector, private companies, and public authorities. We have also specialized police units and state prosecutors on domestic and sexual violence in some of the regions of the Czech Republic. However, despite the positive developments, we still face a lot of challenges. Specialized shelters for victims of gender-based violence are available only in 2 major cities in the Czech Republic. It means that the majority of the Czech population has not been able to accept those shelters. We do not have any special treatment centers for victims of sexual violence yet. Social service providers often face lack of financing. Gender stereotypes continue to have negative impact on the situation of victims. The system of help to victims is quite fragmented, and victims often have to get in touch with a number of different public authority bodies to reach for effective help. To react to those challenges, the Czech Republic adopted its new gender equality strategy in March last year. The strategy includes over 400 measures to promote gender equality in the Czech Republic. Elimination of gender-based violence is one of the 8 key priorities. Furthermore, a specific action plan for the prevention of domestic and sexual violence was adopted in 2019. Following the adoption of the gender equality strategy, we allocated more than 6 million euros from the Norway grants to projects of Czech NGOs. 5 new specialized centers for victims will be opened this year. Furthermore, media campaigns of civil society organizations will be started in the upcoming months. We have also opened a specific call for projects focusing on the support of multi-agency cooperation. In total, 1 million euro will be distributed to NGOs to increase their capacity to cooperate with all other parts of the system of protection against domestic violence. In cooperation with the Alternative Till Vote, the Alternative to Violence, we continue to train public authority bodies to further develop their capacity to provide support to victims, including children. We are also organizing seminars and discussions at primary and high schools about sexual violence and cyber violence. New trainings for police are being developed. To sum up, during the last couple of years, the Czech Republic has intensified its effort to tackle gender-based violence and to provide quality service to victims. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope our conversation today will provide an opportunity to exchange our views, approaches, and good practices to multi-agency cooperation. I would like to thank our experts and colleagues from the Czech civil society organizations, from Chile, and from Alternative to Violence for accepting the invitation to participate at this side event. I wish you a fruitful discussion and hope you will be able to use today's side event to bring some of the ideas back to your organizations and respective countries. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Radan Šafařík. And I now give the floor to Ms. Branislava Marvanova-Vargová, who is the head of social service of ROSA NGO in the Czech Republic and also a chairperson of Governmental Committee for Prevention of Gender-Based Violence. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the floor, and I will repeat good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is connected to our event today. And I'm very pleased to welcome you at this event, and also I'm very pleased to welcome our panelists. This event, as already had been mentioned, is focusing on important topic of multidisciplinary cooperation and coordinated help to women victims of domestic and sexual violence. I don't want to give a long introduction of importance of multi-agency cooperation in supporting victims of violence, because I assume that you are here precisely because you already perceive this topic as an important one. However, let me remind ourselves some facts that had been already mentioned. According to the UN Women globally, almost 1 in 3 women experienced physical and/or sexual violence by their partner or ex-partner. These numbers, as also have been mentioned, can rise in situation of crisis, environmental crisis, health crisis such as COVID-19, or war crisis which we are now witnessing in Ukraine. Violence affects women's lives in all areas, and various institutions and organizations need to be involved in effective support and protection of victims. No single organization or institution can provide full and satisfying help and support in all areas of women's lives that are affected by violence. In order to provide relevant support and protection, we, organizations and institutions, have to cooperate. This side event shall focus on the forms, benefits, and also obstacles of multi-agency approach. Multi-agency cooperation can take place at different levels: national or system level, regional level, city level, case management level, or it can go even closer to the victims of violence and offers them a safe space where most of their needs can be met at one point. Let me share with you my experiences from different levels of multi-agency cooperation. As it was already mentioned, I have an honor to chair the Committee for Prevention of Domestic Violence and Violence Against Women, which is advisory body to the government that consists of representatives of all involved ministries, representatives of civic society, and experts on violence against women. And I see this committee as one layer of multi-agency cooperation at a system level. This committee prepares and monitors National Action Plan for Prevention of Domestic and Gender-Based Violence. And as it was mentioned, one of the tasks of current National Action Plan is also focusing on strengthening multi-agency cooperation through financial mechanism of Norwegian funds. As I'm working in Rosa Center for Women and I'm in direct and everyday contact with women experiencing violence for over 20 years already, I see the main importance of my work in the governmental committee in being able to bring voices and experiences of women victims of violence, bring the obstacles they face and their needs to the level of a systemic solution of this issue. Thanks to the long-term membership of Rosa Center for Women in Network Women Against Violence Europe, I had an opportunity to cooperate on international projects that address the topic of multi-agency cooperation. Thanks to one of these projects, Bridging Gaps, Rosa Center was able to establish multi-agency team at one of the Prague districts already in year 2006. This project combined the cooperation on local level with the case management coordination. I would like to share with you our current experience from ongoing project where we set up cooperation with different sectors, which can be another form of multi-agency cooperation. We combine the NGO sector represented by Coalition of Support Services, NENA, private company IKEA, and Charles University. Together, we made several commitments and set up several steps of cooperation. One part of it is education, and we created an educational program about gender-based violence for students of all faculties at the Charles University. As students from different disciplines can meet and discuss the issue of gender-based violence, we create a base for their future possible cooperation and mutual understanding. We also help employers to set up internal procedures for domestic and sexual violence cases, so victims, for example, can get paid days off if they need to solve their situation related to violence. From these different levels of multi-agency cooperation, I have learned that there are some key prerequisites that need to be set up at all levels in order to achieve effective support and protection of victims. One of these prerequisites is the common understanding of violence against women as a human rights violation, as a form of gender-based violence, and common understanding of its roots and consequences from all parts of support system. This should be the standard. However, from experiences of many victims, we know that they can get different classification of their situation from different institutions. They can get different recommendations or even rejection because their experience with violence does not fit in. We should not create support system and multi-agency cooperation in a way that victims need to fit in, but the other way around. The system should respond to the individual needs and rights of victims. This victim-centered approach, which puts the needs of victims in the center of all intervention, is needed for effective support and protection. Another topic that I think is important to point out in context of multi-agency cooperation is that institutions and organizations that are involved have different structural power. For example, police or criminal courts have different structural power than support services or healthcare providers or others. This is an important issue in context of domestic and sexual violence because it itself is rooted in unequal power distribution and dynamic of power disbalance. And if there is unconscious power dynamic between organizations and institutions, for victims, it may create parallel process of power dynamic and result in inefficient interventions. To create effective multi-agency cooperation, we need to address this power disbalance and strengthen the voice of those with less power. At this point, I would like to stress out the importance of specialist services for women victims of violence who should play a key role in the multi-agency cooperation. Our goal should be to take the burden of contacting different agencies and repeating the story and following instructions from the victims, from the shoulders of the victims, and create the safe space where the system is coordinated and meeting on one place for the victim, not that the victim has to be ready for the system. This, of course, requires a lot of resources, personal and financial. However, if we compare the cost of already known economical consequences of violence against women that is constituted each year for economics of all countries in the world, and the costs of not coordinated actions on one side, and the victim-centered and multi-agency cooperation approach on the other side, we can clearly see which side is more effective, more economical, save money, resources, and most important, can save lives. So let me stop here. I wish you fruitful discussion. Thank you for inviting me and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Branislava Marvanova-Vargova, for your remarks. Now, it's my pleasure to open the panel discussion. And the first speaker is Ms. Petra Sikorová, who is a lawyer and consultant at Profem, an NGO in the Czech Republic. Let me only introduce shortly the organization. The mission of PROFEM is to eliminate violence against women, and the organization provides social and legal consulting and intervention services. They're also about to open a specialized and interdisciplinary center to help for survivors of sexual violence. Petra, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Mr. Broja. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Petra, and thanks to all my pre-speakers who already introduced me, our organization, and set the ground for the topic. It is a great honor to speak here at this side event because 4 years ago I also attended the CSW, and I still have very vivid memories of the time and of the energy that is there. So I particularly greet those who are watching us from New York. In my short presentation, in following 10 to 12 minutes, I would like to talk about us, about PROFEM, and what we are doing right now, which is working on the establishment of the first ever Czech Center for victims of sexual violence. So I will briefly describe our journey and where we are right now these days. As Mr. Broja already mentioned, we are a Czech organization based in Prague, and we have already quarter century of history and experience with working with victims of domestic and sexual violence. Primarily, we started with the topic of domestic violence, and we worked with the topic of sexual violence merely within the framework of the domestic one. However, for the last 7 years, we started treating sexual violence independently and as a specific individual phenomena. We provide our victims and our clients who are victims with legal support, with social services, social counseling. We offer psychotherapy and other related services. So first of all, I will describe the current situation and our motivation that led us to the idea that it is necessary and it is crucial to establish a complex center only for victims of sexual violence in the Czech Republic. Right now, we are living in a system where there are no specific organizations dealing only and specifically with the topic of sexual violence. Of course, there are certain services who treat the topic, however, it's not in a complex manner, complex way. This means that there is a fragmentation of current existing services. This means that many times when a victim comes to one service, she is transferred to another one because the first place is not equipped, is not ready for this type of victim. And unfortunately, as Bronislava mentioned, this leads that the victim has to repeat and retell her experience, talk again and again about her trauma. All this with the risk that during the process she will meet people and personnel who is not very well acquainted and does not know the topic of sexual and gender-based violence thoroughly and appropriately. So this is the current situation, which leads to the most serious fact that current system may contribute to secondary victimization and re-traumatization of victims of sexual violence. So this is not only a problem, and it is also not in compliance with the documents and recommendations of the Council of Europe. Above all this, current system is entirely or almost entirely gender neutral, and it does not treat gender-based violence and sexual violence as part of gender-based violence as a specific phenomenon whose victims have specific needs and specific vulnerability. This is possible to be ensured only by a specialized service offering complex set of services. So that leads me to the question, what we did. We started to collect inspiration from abroad. We conducted a study trip to Norway because the system of rape crisis center is developed there. We conducted workshops with colleagues from the United States and Ireland, and we tend to collect inspiration anywhere possible, included our neighboring countries, Germany, Austria, or also France or Spain. The collection of this information was crucial for us in order to think about a system which would be adaptable and which could be modified to our Czech context and our Czech surroundings, because we believe that every country's needs can be a little bit different. And again, as Bronya said, it is crucial to adjust the system and not to force the victims to adjust themselves just in order to fit into some box. So that leads us to our project, to the Center for Victims of Sexual Violence. Before I even say anything else, I will briefly say that the center is in the making. We are in the process. It has not been established yet, but we are working on it day and night, and it is a big quest for us these days. As I already mentioned, so it would be a complex center for victims of domestic violence and other forms of gender-based violence when there is a sexual aspect or the crime was of some sexual nature. The key principle and the main idea behind the center is complex interdisciplinary cooperation among relevant stakeholders and relevant actors. So the idea is to have a comprehensive set of services under one roof where the victim comes, and under one roof she can be provided with a variety of services that she may or may not need in the moment or in the near or further future. The idea is that she does not have to travel all around the city or around the region, but she can take all necessary steps necessary for her in one place under supervision of very well experienced personnel and variety of experts who know how to implement trauma-informed approach. And also the surroundings and the equipment of such place is appropriate and adequate for her needs. So in our center, we aim to provide a variety of services, be it social counseling, which is something we already do now, legal counseling, psychotherapy, both individual and also group therapy. In relation to the legal counseling, we also will provide victims with ensuring the legal representation of them if they decide to continue to the criminal procedure, if they do so. Also, we would provide crisis intervention, including crisis accommodation. So if, let's imagine if in the middle of the night, a victim comes directly after an attack of sexual nature, she can have direct, immediate crisis intervention, which can be followed by her staying in our crisis accommodation for the night or for a couple of days until she stabilizes herself or she finds resources that are absolutely crucial to deal with the situation and its consequences. I already mentioned the criminal proceedings, so that would be also a topic of our interest. We plan to have a special interviewing room in our center, so it would be possible for the victim and the police to conduct all the steps necessary for the criminal procedure, including interviews necessary for the investigation in our space. So the room would be equipped, it would fulfill all the necessary legal criteria, and it would be possible for the victim to go through the interview there. Also, we will offer collection and storing of samples and other necessary evidence for the victim. We are offering to store them in order to give victim the time to think about the whole event, about the trauma, and think about whether she wants to continue in the criminal procedure, because it's not necessary for us that a victim who comes to our center files a report or decides to continue through a criminal procedure. Last but not leastly, we will provide basic medical treatment, basic medical service, because that's also something very important, something crucial. It would include the collection of the samples that I mentioned, because they are very closely related to medical care, but also some medical treatment, especially for cases when a victim comes directly after an attack. but we also plan to conduct testing for sexually transmitted diseases or providing some emergency birth control pills, etc., etc. So this was an overview of all the services that would be available under one roof, which is something unique and something we believe it's crucial for the victim's needs and vulnerability. That brings me to the benefits of the multidisciplinary cooperation and to the arguments why we actually need a center like that in the Czech Republic. Existence of such a complex center where all the services are situated under one roof obviously leads to better continuity of support, to better cooperation and coherence among all the stakeholders. So it is much easier to establish cooperation, to communicate when there is one focal point, one platform which provides all the necessary knowledge, know-how, expertise, personnel that can deal with the topic. So we are convinced that it would be much easier to focus the attention of all the relevant actors at this place and to strengthen our efforts to help victims efficiently and effectively there under one roof once again. In relation to the victim's perspective, it is crucial that this approach minimizes and mitigates negative impacts that the trauma and the criminal offense has. That's non-negotiable. However, if there is only one place, one set of people that the victim deals with, and she does not have to retell her story many times, it can reduce the risk and the overall danger of re-victimization and of a secondary trauma happening to her. This leads to our overall final principal goal, which is a better exercise of victims' rights in the criminal procedure, but not only there, and empowerment of victims in the way they handle the trauma and how they are able to live their lives after such traumatic event. I will conclude just briefly with the financial perspective of our project. So the project is funded and supported by, once again, Norwegian funds in a 3-year-long implementation period. Above that, we are collecting funds from private foundations. We have a public collection for individual donors, and we are aiming to include the services in the standard of state funding, and not only state, but also regional and municipal funding schemes. For the project, we partnered with Prague 6 as a municipality and Crisis Center in Fredrikstad in Norway, which is an NGO with which we have already been in touch before. So we are adding this information just to show that we are not such a big organization, but we have a big plans and a big vision, and we are trying to do our best to make it happen. I thank you all respectfully for your attention. I thank the Office of the Government for organizing this side event. I am adding the contact to myself, so if there right now or anywhere in the future, anytime in the future, if there were any questions, you can turn to me. And I am returning the word to Mr. Broža, and I'm looking forward to any possible questions that may be here in the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Petra, for giving me floor. And thank you for your comprehensive presentation. Very interesting, very well done. Thank you. Now I turn the floor to Mr. Henning Mohout, the clinical psychologist of the Alternative to Violence, an NGO from Norway. Henning, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Mr. Broža, and thank you, the Gender Equality Department of the Office of the Czech Government, for organizing this side event and for inviting us to contribute to it. My name is Henning Mohaupt. I'm a clinical psychologist and researcher with Alternative to Violence, a Norwegian NGO that provides therapy for families affected by family violence. And today I'm going to talk about how we view multidisciplinary efforts to prevent serious and lethal intimate partner violence in Norway. Now I have problems with the with the techniques here. Okay. Here we go. I'm sorry. So, to introduce myself and Alternative to Violence. Alternative to Violence has been active in Norway's work with family violence since 1987. So we've been active for a very long time, and it's been learning all the way. ATV offers psychotherapeutic treatment for adults who use intimate partner violence. So that's predominantly men who use violence towards partner and/or family. Since 2008, we also offer therapy for adults who have been subjected to intimate partner violence as the main problem. And during the past years, we also offer specialized treatment for children who have been exposed to violence in the home. So Alternative to Violence started out as a treatment offer for men with violence problems, and this is still our most important mandate. But paradoxically, we ended up with having a highly specialized service for men who use violence, and through that work, we found that there is actually a lack of equally specialized service for victims of violence, and especially for children of violence. And in many ways, there still is a lack of specialized coordinated services for that group, although it's a very large group. And that is also what I hope we can discuss here today. Our work has taught us that ending violence in the family demands support and safety for victims and children, obviously, but also help for those who use violence to change their behavior and relational functioning. This is complex work, often very time-consuming work, and different phases of engagement demand different interventions, often several providers, and a need to be coordinated. So when we work with families, we also meet with the police, with child protective services, with social services, with shelters, and so on. Representing Alternative to Violence, I was part of the Norwegian Intimate Partner Homicide Committee from 2018 until 2020. And this committee wrote a report advising the Norwegian government with the title Foretold Homicides ? This was a government appointment committee that had the mandate to examine 19 intimate partner homicides committed between 2014 and 2017 in Norway to, quote, uncover whether and possibly to what extent and how the public support services have failed in the prevention of these homicides, end quote. Now, it's important to mention that in Norway, we have, fortunately, very few intimate partner homicides. Right now, it's about 7 a year. But this document is also a very thorough work on serious intimate partner violence, because, as I'm going to talk more about, all homicides were preceded by severe intimate partner violence. So this can be both read as a text on how to prevent intimate partner homicides and serious intimate partner violence. Now, intimate partner homicide can be described as the most serious form of intimate partner violence. The United Nations Global Study on Homicide from 2019 states that while men are most often victims and perpetrators of homicide in general, female homicide victims are most likely to be killed by an intimate partner or family member. And this is also the case in Norway. So what characterizes intimate partner homicides in Norway? First of all, They're characterized by gender imbalance. While mild to moderate intimate partner violence is somewhat evenly distributed between men and women in Norway, severe intimate partner violence is experienced more often by women. Intimate partner homicides is even more unevenly distributed, with women being far more likely to be killed by their male partners than vice versa. So it's a gendered phenomenon. Second, in all 19 intimate partner homicide cases we reviewed, there was intimate partner violence before the killing. In general, it has been recorded that in 17% of intimate partner homicide cases since 1990, there had been intimate partner violence before the homicide. And in 50% of all these cases since 1990, more than 5 instances of intimate partner homicide had been recorded prior to the homicide, so they were known. In 1/3 of these cases, threats to the victim's life had been recorded prior to the homicide, and in 1/4 of all cases, it was actually known that the victim feared for her life. So in intimate partner homicide cases, we see that the risk is often known to public support services. Thirdly, these cases have been characterized by pretty poor risk assessment routines. While 9 of 10 perpetrators had contact with public services in one way or another before the homicide, risk assessment was done only for 1/3 of these cases, and risk intervention by a bit more than 1 out of 10. Also in 1 out of 10 cases only with perpetrators, risk had been communicated across services. So when it comes to risk assessment and communication of risk between services in serious violence cases that end up to be lethal, there's a lot of work to be done. The numbers are somewhat stronger for victims, but they're still very low. Fourth, intimate partner homicides in Norway were characterized by marginalized victims and perpetrators. So both victims and perpetrators often had accumulated life challenges, such as unstable employment, alcohol and/or substance use problems, mental health issues, and a history of being a refugee or a migrant. This also indicates that both victims and perpetrators involved in serious intimate partner violence often need support from different specialized professional groups. Now, during the past 10 years, what we have seen is that the number of intimate partner homicide cases that occurred after preventive efforts towards the perpetrator had been initiated has declined since 2014. And this is also in line with international research that suggests how targeting perpetrator risk factors may be more effective in intimate partner homicide prevention than targeting victim risk factors. By preventive efforts, we mean interventions done by the police, by a doctor, by a psychologist or psychiatrist, hospital staff, lawyers, or child protective services. So also, it seems that whatever effort there is being made to support perpetrators at risk, it seems to help to prevent a lethal outcome. So the implications of research on intimate partner homicides in Norway and internationally is that it is a gendered phenomenon. It develops and lasts over time. It doesn't suddenly occur. Often, the risk and the violence is communicated or known to public support services, such as the police, healthcare, or social services. Often, intimate partner violence co-occurs with other life challenges in families. And the violence seems to be driven by the perpetrator's personal, social, and relational problems. Consequently, working towards ending violence and its effects demands a coordinated multidisciplinary approach, which must include safety measures, risk assessment, and support for victims and children, but also risk assessment, support, and opportunities to change for perpetrators. We cannot forget them because they are the ones who actually are violent. Now, how is this organized in Norway and in most countries? There are many engaged services and people who work with safety, like shelters or the police. The social services are often involved, trying to help victims to get safe housing or economic support. There are therapy providers such as Alternative to Violence, but also alcohol and substance use treatment institutions or mental health treatment facilities. There are institutions working with integration of refugees or migrants. And there is obviously the judicial system that responds and persecutes serious intimate partner violence. Now, unfortunately, these services often work independent of each other. Often they do not know about each other's competence or even mandates. They work under different legislations. And very seldom they effectively coordinate their efforts regarding timing and regarding the exchange of vital information. So we would like to see more of this. And this is also the main advice from the Intimate Partner Homicide Committee, that service providers need to find ways to more effectively share information and to more effectively view themselves as part of a holistic approach where many service providers and many different professionals work together and time their efforts together to help families affected by serious violence, to reduce risk and to help to find safe solutions for victims and children as well. Now, what do we need to get there? The Intimate Partner Homicide Committee advises that all decision makers and service providers need to be domestic violence informed. Just as Mrs. Marvanova-Vargova said, it was great to hear this example from the university she mentioned, because we also advise that domestic violence and gender-based violence as a social phenomenon should be part of the curricula of most professional trainings of people who work with people. Definitely of the police and social work, but also of medicine, psychology, law, dentistry, and even teaching. So that all professionals in the country know that this exists and how to deal with it when they encounter it. To get there, we need national action plans to counteract intimate partner violence. And we need funding, obviously. National action plans need to be translated into regional and municipal action plans because cities work differently than rural communities and have different needs. On the local level, we need professionally organized shelters. We need police specialized in IPV risk assessment and family violence assessment. We need social services, child protection services, and integration services who know how also culture and trauma, migration trauma, affects the development of intimate partner violence and family violence. We need accessible general mental health care. And we argue that we need specialized therapeutic services for perpetrators of intimate partner violence. These institutions need to have knowledge-based routines for how to assess, recognize, and deal with cases of intimate partner violence. And they need to have knowledge-based routines for how to exchange and constructively use information on intimate partner violence within and across institutions. Finally, we sketched how this could be achieved at the local level, in small communities and cities. And we suggest that every community in the country establishes a permanent multidisciplinary consultation group on serious and potentially lethal intimate partner violence. Such a multidisciplinary consultation group should ideally be composed of members with following professional backgrounds: police, social work, mental health, medicine, child protection, cultural diversity and migration, and law. Such a group, if stable, could function as a resource for all local services, NGOs, or government services on how to deal with complicated and high-risk violence cases. They could function as a resource for how to deal with risk assessment and intervention. And by being multidisciplinary and consisting of people from diverse professional backgrounds, they could effectively reduce borders between institutions and develop a common understanding between different professions on how to encounter serious violence in the family. So this was what I had. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking very much forward to discussing with everyone else later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Henning, for an excellent presentation, very interesting. I would like to now encourage the participants not to hesitate to place questions, because there will be time after the presentations to discuss, because I think that there must be many details which may be further discussed. So please use the question and answer function at the bottom right part of your screen. And now I would like to give floor to our third speaker, Mr. Renato Galvez, who is a coordinator of the Attention, Protection and Reparation Program for Violence Against Women of the National Service for Women and Gender Equity in Chile. Renato, the floor is yours.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see and we can hear well.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon to all the attendees. My name is Renato Galvez Inostroza. I am a lawyer, and as you said, I'm the coordinator of the Program for Assistance, Protection, and Reparation in Violence Against Women of the National Service for Women and Gender Equality, also known as CERNAMEC. First, I would like to thank, on behalf of the institution, the Minister of Women and Gender Equity, Antonia Orellana, and the National Director of CERNAMEC, Marina Massman, the invitation and the opportunity to present about the help and services provided for women victims of violence in a comprehensive and multidisciplinary way. In Chile, and specifically at CERNAMEC, we have the Unit in Violence Against Women, whose objective is to contribute to strengthen women's autonomy, promoting their right to a life free of violence through programs or initiatives related to prevention, assistance, protection, and reparation in violence against women, and the access to legal aid through specialized legal representation. Its main objectives are to strengthen the preventive role in violence against women in young people and strategic players, promoting the right for women of a life free of violence, both publicly as privately. This through the program of prevention in violence against women, which is focused on young people between 14 and 29 years old, and also adults that works with young people. Secondly, to assist and protect victims of violence, to repair the harm inflicted and tend to their autonomy to eradicate violence from their lives. And finally, to deliver an immediate and specialized response, providing legal representation and psychosocial articulation in femicides and public consultation cases for violence against women. Also to promote cross-sectional actions with justice and police, the latter through the Program for Assistance, Protection, and Reparation, which we will call APR for its Spanish initials. The objective of the APR program is to diminish the psychosocial damage in women victims of gender-based violence, deploying a network of centers at a national level and a line of intervention which make the national system of response of the violence against women network from CERNAMEC, being this an integral part of the state's response of the problem of violence against women. Now we're going to see the APR programmatic offering. We have 43 shelter houses, 111 women's centers, 16 men's centers, re-education centers for men who commit violence, 1 women's centers for victims of human trafficking, 3 assistance and reparation centers for women's victims, survivors of sexual violence, which we call CBS for its Spanish initials, 1 legal representation center in the precautionary measure centers, 7 comprehensive remedial case centers for violence against women, which we call CARI for its Spanish initials, 1 center for continuous psychosocial care, 1 center for and 1 center for deaf women. We also have this extreme violence component, which is made to assist cases of femicides and public connotation cases for violence against women. This component consists of lawyers who provide legal assistance for the victims or their families and coordinate the psychosocial assistance they need. And we also have a telephone and telematic assistance component, which consists of a totally free 24/7 confidential communication channel to the helpline 1455, web chat, and WhatsApp, which also allows the communication of non-speaking Spanish people here in Chile. In today's presentation, we will focus mainly on the system given on the women's centers, the shelter houses, the assistance and reparation sexual violence centers, and the reparatory centers, care centers. The APR program, which I'm a part of, consists of lawyers, psychologists, social workers, and sociologists, where we all carry out technical orientations which serve as the basis that provides guidelines for the CERNAMEC centers throughout the country. And in them, there is a multidisciplinary and comprehensive approach of gender and human rights, since violence is addressed through psychosocial and legal benefits in favor of female victims. So I'm gonna make a little explanation about what women's shelters are and what our women's centers are, also along with CBS and CARI. Women's shelters, its objective is to ensure the protection of women through psychosocial legal services and quality temporary residential care whose risk situation is serious or vital as a result of the violence they have experienced on the part of their current or former partner. On the other hand, we have the women's centers whose objective is to reduce violence against women through psychosocial legal services and referral to networks that allow generating a timely response in the territory, which is the same for the CBS, but the difference is that these victims are victims and survivors of sexual violence. So what all these centers have in common is that they all have a coordinator, a lawyer, a psychologist, and a social worker. So all of them as a team create an individual intervention plan together with women with legal representation when they have decided to file a police report or to make a legal complaint. The strategic purpose of the territorial installation of assistance centers is the promotion from a gender perspective of cultural and social changes that contribute to the construction of an egalitarian society that first respects human rights and also intervenes from a local space in the areas of daily life and citizenship of women. The identification and positioning of violence against women from the community space allows the strengthening of women's protection networks, thus contributing to security plans and situations of imminent risk. The gender perspective, the psychosocial and legal approach, and networking are 3 of the main axes that form that work carried out through the centers. The line of psychosocial care that is implemented is made up of a set of actions aimed at providing care and support to women who are experiencing violence by their partners or ex-partners. Through these actions, it seeks to build, together with women, forms of relationships and care strategies that allow them to stop the abuse to which they are subjected, with the central axis of the work being the strengthening of their personal and gender identity, together with the generation of awareness of their rights and the risk that they might be living. Oops, I'm sorry. The social orientation and referral to local and regional public services is transversal to the care model, whose main objective is to complement care in issues related to housing, health, training, and employment, as well as other services related to the protection of children, nurseries, kindergarten, education, protection of rights, and specialized cares for children and adolescents. So in this multidisciplinary help for victims of sexual and domestic violence, we must say that the CERNAMEC network is also composed and offers first support care and risk assessment, psychological assistance, temporary residential assistance, and also the legal field, which is very important. So for the first support care and risk assessment, aimed at emotionally containing the consulting woman, collecting background information on her situation of violence to assess the level of risk she is in, informing, guiding, and collaborating on exit strategy along with her. The attention is carried out by a professional from the psychosocial duo specialized in the subject. It is a moment in which the woman is listened to and treated with all respect and confidentiality, trying to establish a bond with her and also build based on trust, respect, and freedom, conditions that allowed her to open her personal world, to express what she feels, and to reflect in a different way about their problems. The purpose of first support care and risk assessments is to emotionally embrace and contain the woman, to identify the needs and motivations of the inquiry, to collect records of the violent relationship she's in, and to evaluate the level of risk, make explicit the dynamics of abuse, to inform about social support networks, basic orientation regarding the violence law, reveal personal and potential resources of information or informal support networks, to define strategies with women. This means what to do and how to do it. And last, referring according to the needs and requirements of women. On the other hand, on the psychological assistance, it means consists of providing brief psychotherapy, whose purpose is to strengthen the identity and self-esteem of women, together with the development of their personal resources and autonomy to leave the abusive relationship, through the development of exercise of their skills. Psychological care is carried out under the modality of individual psychotherapy, group psychotherapy, and experiential workshops. It is worth highlighting that this intervention is implemented in a systemic relational understanding of the phenomenon of violence against women, assuming that there is also a cultural background in which relationships between men and women are inscribed from a gender perspective. The main objective of psychological support aims to intervene in the relationship of violence, promoting the eradication of this form of interaction in the couple and the development of behaviors, skills, and competencies in women that favor their self-care and protection. It seeks to develop and enhance skills and personal resources in women so that they affect the distancing, reduction, and elimination of aggressions typical of abusive dynamics, redefining interactional style based on jungle and conjugal and family coexistence. Another objective is that women understand violence as a social-cultural phenomenon, which goes beyond their private space with cultural influence that contribute to keeping it related to a dependency, be this dependency emotional and or economic. A central objective in this process is aimed at the recovering and/or developing of a woman's basic self-confidence, her dignity, and also self-respect. Personal esteem and resource assessments, thus strengthening her autonomy and leading role in their own life and decisions, being perceived as a person who has not only the right, but the human right to live a life free of aggressions and violence. Now, about the temporary residential assistance, we must say that we activate this service once the risk assessment shows serious and vital risk. Here, women can temporarily stay with their children, during which time legal steps are taken to provide the necessary security conditions, not only for women, but also to their sons and daughters. And last but not least, in the legal field, we must mention that in no case will it be an obligation or condition for women to enter our network, to have filed a police report against the aggressor, or to have made a legal complaint. That means that a female victim could only access to psychosocial care and not so to legal representation. Notwithstanding this, given the multidisciplinary approach to addressing violence, women will always be guided and informed by our teams regarding the benefits and protections provided by to filing a police report or by making a legal complaint, such as, for example, being able to obtain some precautionary measure in their favor, such as the prohibition of the approach of the aggressor, the immediate abandonment of the house of the aggressor, and even preventive detention, among others. Likewise, access to justice will be sought as a reparatory measure for the victim, and the crime committed will be prosecuted with the consequent conviction against the aggressor. In conclusion, we at the Unit in Violence Against Women are deeply convinced that the multidisciplinary help for the victims and adequate and pertinent coordination with other institutions and prevention actions will allow us all to advance in the cultural change that is urgently required and necessary to finally eradicate violence against women, not only in Chile, but all over the world. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. That was our presentation.
Muchas gracias too. Thank you, Renato, for your in-depth and excellent presentation. So now is the floor for our attendees who are placing questions. We have a string of questions. That's excellent. And you can still continue, although we have 15 minutes exactly for answering the questions. So let me first start with Joan Ferguson Kavanagh, asking a question to AVP Henning. Are there AVP programs in prison settings?
I don't know if I understand the question right, if there are ATV programs in present settings. We are very active. We are presently working. We are also developing our efforts all the time. For instance, we can mention that until 2008, we did not have services for women subjected to violence if their partner was not in therapy. Now we have that, and we get in a different kind of violence. We get in more serious violence because we also get in women who come here without their partner, coming to therapy. That would be a major development that also made us aware of how different families are and how different victims' needs are. And I think, as Branislava said initially, it's really important that we need to tailor our interventions to the individual. All people are different. They come with different needs. They come from different countries, different backgrounds, and that also leads to us having projects all the time on how to improve our work. So yes, we have projects in the present. We have had projects in the past. We develop a lot by listening to the people who come to us and understanding their reality out there and trying to adjust our professional understanding of that reality. And I think that's an important way to go as an NGO when you want to effectively improve services. We need to listen to the people who come to us. I don't know if that was a good question. Answer, I mean. Sorry.
Certainly was a good answer, and I believe that Joanna may even place further question if needs to be clarified. Let me then go to a question which was placed for Profem, for Petra, from Michal Pavlíček. What will happen with the center after the pilot project? Do you plan to scale it to other cities in the Czech Republic, Petra?
Thank you for the question. So regarding the first part of the question, currently the part of the project, it's also establishment of a sustainable long-term strategy of funding, strategy of overall existence and insurance of the services. So we will be developing that during the pilot project. And regarding the second part of the question, whether we plan to expand to other cities, I believe it is too early to predict that. Currently, we are focusing on the project in Prague, and even though the idea sounds very lovely and it definitely would be feasible to have these centers all around the Czech Republic, it is definitely too early to say that.
Okay, thank you. The third question placed by Branislava Marvanova-Vargová, and it aims at Renato. Can victims be accommodated in temporary residential assistance also based on their request? In parentheses, if they feel they are in danger, or it is only for those where the risk has been assessed as high by the system?
Yes. Yes. So it's not that it doesn't matter if the woman feels that she's in danger, but we use that the risk to be assessed as high by the system, meaning that we at the women's centers made a risk evaluation, and then we can see if she's in high risk or vital risk. And then we offer the temporary residentials because we have two different ways to attend women's centers and also shelters. So for women's centers, well, both of them are always volunteer by women, but you can go to a women's center whenever you want. You can make an appointment for attention, but in our shelters, it's always from your transfer or referred by women's centers or by the justice system or the police. So it will always have to have a risk that has been assessed as high by the system.
Thank you, Renato. And I'll remain with you, actually. There's one more question to you from Joanne Ferguson. Chile's multidisciplinary response seems to be focused on training the women who are in violent relationships. What kind of training, about training for the men involved in the domestic violence, or training for the boys, future men?
Yes, as we said, we are convinced that a cultural change is needed, and that not only domestic violence, but gender-based violence has a lot of influence by our culture. So that is why we have these two programs. We have the APR program, which is protection for women who are already victims. But we also have the prevention in violence against women, which is focused mainly in young people, because we believe that working with teenagers and with people that works with young people, it's one of the most important things to advance and to move forward in the cultural change. In the other hand, we also have 16 centers all over the country for men who have committed violence to their partners or former partners. So we also make psychosocial work with them to re-educate them also. And in those centers, which we call CRH, they can also go volunteer by themselves and make an appointment, or they can also be referred from the police or the justice system. So it's not only that we're focused on like training the women, because we have to attend them and to give them the all the attention and reparation that they need, along with legal advice. But we also believe that working with men is very important, because when we work with men who commit violence against their women, we're not only working with that man, but we're also making a benefit for this man partner or former partner or future partner. So we really believe that we must re-educate them, and we also have to focus and work with young people. And as a personal opinion, not only with young people, but also with children from their very first ages and years, like to advance in this cultural change that we need.
Thank you, Renato. The next question comes from Michal Pavlíček, and it's to Henning. You mentioned the need for specialized police units. In the Czech Republic, we sometimes face lack of capacity and understanding of gender-based violence at the level of courts. Is there a system of specialized courts and judges or mandatory training on gender-based violence in Norway?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for that. Yes and no. I think during the past years, there has been a general a higher awareness on the severity and the importance to understand gender-based violence and intimate partner violence at the courts. And the general attorney also instructed all the courts to be more aware of intimate partner violence. And for example, we have this this new measure that courts can implement, that they can sentence a perpetrator to giving him a restraint order with electronic control, which basically means that he cannot enter a certain area, which is defined by the court, which sometimes can be a large geographic area in which the victim lives, so that the victim knows she can live securely and she can move around in her town and go to work and live her life without being afraid of being found or attacked, because the perpetrator has an electronic control device that alarms the police when he enters a specified area. And this measure has been in place since 2013 and has been very little used, which is a brilliant example of how the government tries to implement measures and how long it takes for different parts of society to understand and implement these measures. Now, we have some people in the judicial system who are very aware and very active, but it takes time to go down to every police station and to every police department. So no, we do not have specialized courts, which I personally think would be brilliant to have. I think family violence courts is a good way to go. that the court said only deal with different levels of family violence, because in order to make good judgment that provides safety, you also need to have a good understanding of the psychological impact violence has on everyone who is affected. But in general, what the police is very good at here is that they all have training in risk assessment, and they have pretty high level of risk assessment use now. So when there comes in a family violence case, the police does they have the means to do a professional risk assessment, which is a step in the right direction. But I think there's still a lot that needs to be done. Yeah.
Thank you, Henning. And I mean, this conversation also allows for the panelists to ask questions as well. And we have a question from Henning to Branislava. What was important for you to include in the curricula on gender-based violence at university? What were the most important things you wanted students to understand?
Yeah, there are a lot of elements we wanted to include. We also decided to compose the curriculum in a way that also the lecturers or presenters have been created from multidisciplinary teams, so to speak, because there have been teachers from the practice, from the organizations who are working with victims, with organizations who are working with children, and also academics. So we included the basic facts and current research on gender-based violence and the data from Czech Republic and from the EU, for example, the FRA study, etc. And then the important parts are the risk assessment, the safety planning, and also knowing the responsibilities, limits, and capacities of different players, of the police, of medical staff, of social workers, of support services, so everyone can learn what to expect from the other one. So the multi-agency cooperation was part of the curriculum. So it was quite complex, and we tried to make it as much practical for the participants as it was possible. And we have first year behind us, and we had students from medical faculties, from psychology, from law faculty, pedagogical faculty. So it was quite complex also from the side of the students, and they could exchange their views, their positions, and at the end they've been asked to write a thesis about how I see myself within my professional position related to the other professionals helping the victims. So.
Thank you very much. Well, we still have a minute to go, and I believe that we may maybe take 2-3 minutes after the time is up. So I have a question to all the panelists from Pavla Radova, and maybe just try to be brief, please. How do you take into account the specific needs of women from vulnerable groups? Migrants, ethnic minorities, women with disabilities, etc. Maybe let's start with Petra, please.
Definitely, and I will be brief. So firstly, we definitely take into account that intersectionality is important when tackling violence against women, and we are aware that certain characteristics are disadvantaging in violence against women. So firstly, we have specific guidelines and methodics and methodological approach to these situations. And secondly, we deal with it in individual cases. So maybe just to add a quick example, we have had a client with audio impairment. So we were working how to ensure translation for her children and how to deal with the situation when she couldn't hear us. So yeah, the short answer would be we have theory and we have a methodological approach, and then we deal with it on an individual level.
Thank you, Petra. And Renato, the same question?
It's a very important question because we assist all women in their diversity. This means women from Chile, migrants, trans women, and we also have in our technical guidance intersectional focus, which is very important to attend all women with no difference. And we also have we also attend migrants who doesn't have a regular status here in Chile. It doesn't matter for us because we prevail that they're being victims of violence. So it doesn't matter if their regular status is according to our legal immigration law or not. And about disabilities, we are very proud that for the past 2 years, we developed a center, a women's center for deaf women. And it's a very important center because deaf women always approached to us and said that they were like always left behind because they could not attend any of the centers because we didn't have any people that could interpret what they were feeling or what they needed. So we have this center which we're very proud of because it works. It's based here in Santiago, but it works for deaf women all over the country. So we are advancing and looking forward to have the as much centers for all women and their diversity. But those are one of the main points that I can tell about the diversity of women and how we attend them.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that we're able to address all the questions raised by the attendees, and thank you very much for the questions, and also thank you panelists for the answers. Now, let me also, in conclusion, say few remarks to what we've heard from the panelists. I mean, most of all, gender-based violence is indeed still a topic to tackle. The Czech Republic invests in projects focused on preventions and coordinated help. Czech NGOs presented, I mean, through Petra, their great contribution to accessible help. And also Branislava Marvanova-Vargova emphasized the importance of adjusting the system to the needs of those who experience violence. Petra presented their first specialized centers for people seeking support and help. The center of this kind contributes to eliminate secondary victimization and reflects vulnerability of victims. And this approach mitigates a negative experience with dealing with authorities and possible trauma. Very important indeed. From Henning from Norway, he highlighted that female victims of homicide are likely to be killed by their intimate partner, and domestic violence preceded their homicide. However, preventive measures, and very important point, leads to increasing numbers of homicides. An intimate partner homicide committee recommended a holistic approach to the help provided. Now, The last point to what Renato presented here, how to combine first support, care, psychological intervention, residential assistance, and legal support. And indeed, I also took that the multidisciplinary attitude is indeed necessary to combine all the different institutions and services. With this, I would like to close, but before doing so, I would like to thank the panelists. I would like to thank the government of the Czech Republic, and particularly the Department of Gender Equality, Mr. Šafářik, Mrs. Vargová Marvanova. I would like to thank Petra Sikorova and also Henning Mohaupt and Renato Galvez, but indeed all the participants and attendees, those who raised the questions, and all others as well. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and let's keep concerned, and also let's keep working on this very important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.